Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Believe it or not, it seems like it just started, Sap, but we are a quarter way through the season. And so we have to look at the standings right now and take the data that they're giving us. And that means that we're going to 1/4 of the way through the year, look at some of these teams that are staying above that, well above that Mendoza line, above that play-in game line, Sap, and judge if they're contender teams, serious contending teams, or if they're pretender teams, if they're teams that are going to fall back down to earth. We talked about this very briefly a couple of weeks ago about some teams with surprising records, Sap. And it's more than one, and it's teams in both the Eastern and Western Conference. But I think we should start with the team that I think is probably to most people, Sap, the most surprising in terms of their record to start the year, and that's the Orlando Magic at 14-6, just one game out of first place in the Eastern Conference, behind the Celtics, a team that they already beat this season and beat a couple times last year, Sap. So 14-6, the Orlando Magic, they're 9-2 at home. Are they contenders or pretenders?
I think they're pretenders, Jet, only because I really think the Celtics and Bucks are still the best teams in the Eastern Conference by a fairly wide margin. But Orlando's been fantastic this year. They beat the Celtics earlier this year, day after Thanksgiving, like you said. They also beat the Celtics 3 out of 4 last year. Now, again, that was kind of a wonky schedule. Remember, Orlando came into TD Garden near Christmas time and beat the Celtics twice. I mean, that can happen in the NBA when you have those back-to-back games in one arena against the same team. You sometimes will see a 2-game sweep. We saw that with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I know a team we're going to talk about momentarily did that to Golden State a few weeks ago. I'd still say pretenders because I think as good as they are, and I'm a huge Paolo Banchero fan, I think he is outstanding. I also think they need one more scorer so that there's not as much pressure on him because he's still a guy who can hit threes. He can score in a multitude of ways, but he's still best kind of in that mid-range or down low because he's big and strong and can do so many things on the basketball court. And also when you rely so heavily on Markelle Fultz, that's always going to be a question mark because throughout his career, he's just not been a very durable guy. So I'd call Orlando still pretenders, but I'll tell you what, they're a team that's got a very bright future.
Sap, they have 6 guys averaging double figures in points and almost 7. Wendell Carter Jr. is averaging 9.4 points per game. So, they're getting a contribution from a multitude of players, including, like you said, their high draft picks, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner, both very high picks. Mo Wagner, brother of Franz, is also having a nice season for himself, averaging 13 points a game, coming off the bench for the Magic. And so, Sap, I guess the question is, when you're talking about contender pretender in this context, maybe not contending for an NBA championship, but could they finish right where they are, Sap? Could they finish 3rd overall in the Eastern Conference?
They could, yeah, because I think the Celtics and Milwaukee are the 2 best teams. And look, Orlando is certainly in the same tier with, say, Philadelphia, maybe Miami, maybe Cleveland if they get their act together. The Knicks, are a team that gets the most out of its talent. So there could be that wide gap between the Celtics and Milwaukee and then the rest of the Eastern Conference where maybe there's 4 or 5 teams who end up within 5 games of each other. And that's going to set up some interesting first-round series. When 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5, you could see 7-game series in that sense. And I guess if you're trying to label a team a contender, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a championship contender. Like you said, Jed, can they win a series or 2 and kind of crash the party and be a pain in the butt to a team like the Celtics or Milwaukee? I mean, can Orlando in a first or second round series take the Celtics to 6 or 7 games? I think the answer to that is yes, because they seem to match up well with them. But I still think they need one more player, one go-to guy. It's commendable to have 6, 7 guys averaging double figures, but still when you get to the playoffs, you need that one guy you can count on. And as great as Banchero is, his game is not quite fully formed as of yet. He's only in his 2nd year.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was a matter of time with all these high draft picks that the Magic would be able to put together a team. I don't think that people were expecting this to be the year that they really started to come into their own. Like you said, Banchero only in his 2nd year, Wagner in his 3rd. But they really are playing well, and they're getting significant contributions off the bench too. Like I mentioned, Mo Wagner, 13 points a game, and Cole Anthony, 15 points a game, Sap. So that's a lot of points to get from just 2 guys off your bench. In addition to that, they have some other good players coming off the bench too. Joe Ingles, he's not what he used to be, but that's a solid player to come off your bench. Jonathan Isaac, very high pick a couple of years ago. Gary Harris has played some, meaningful games in the NBA. So it's not just a team that's just because their high draft picks are playing well. They're getting contribution from a lot of good players. And they look like, this is the season that they have announced their arrival for being contenders in the East for, a long period of time based on the ages of these players. So if they're able to sustain this, Sap, they are right now, they have a 700 winning percentage. What's their win total pace, Sap? You're better at math than I am. If they're 14-6 right now, approximately.
A little over 57 wins, which I think would be difficult to reach for them. But again, this could be a young team that the players play a lot, so they're able to compile wins where sometimes those veteran teams with load management and injuries may not be fully engaged throughout the entire regular season. And we saw that last year with, say, Memphis and Sacramento in the Western Conference. They finished second and third behind Denver, and then we got to the playoffs. They weren't able to beat teams like Golden State or the Lakers. You could see that with Orlando, the same thing. Maybe they finish third, but if they play Miami or Cleveland in the first round, maybe they lose. But again, this is an organization that's headed in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key for them, and this happens a lot with teams that play really well in the first half, and probably we'll talk about this with every team we're going to talk about now, is that after the All-Star break, you have to keep that momentum. That long pause in the season, it's hard for young teams to then sort of recapture that momentum that they've had. I think we've seen it in the past personally with the Celtics when Tatum and Brown were younger, and that they play really well and then they drop off a bit after the All-Star game. The inverse can also happen too, where I'm sure the Magic will have one, possibly two representatives to the All-Star game, and because they get that bid, it suddenly gives them more confidence and they start playing better. So it could go one way or the other, but sometimes that is what makes or breaks teams, is trying to carry that momentum from the first half of the season into the second half of the season.
Very true.
All right, Sap. So since we talked about the Magic, before we talk about some other teams in the East, let's switch over to the Western Conference, into the team that I think in the West is certainly the most surprising. People might debate that, but I think it's the Thunder, Sap, in second place in the West with 13-6 record, 2 games behind a team we're going to talk about very soon, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Sap, do you ever imagine a situation where the Oklahoma City Thunder finish second in the Western Conference this year?
I could see that happen. Again, they've got a superstar in Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who, by the way, was first team All-NBA last year. He's a legitimate superstar, right? I mean, he's that good. Anyone that can average 30 points per game and be efficient like SGA is someone that's going to be a contending team. They can light up the scoreboard. We saw them do that against the Celtics last year when they broke 150. They're really that good. Chet Holmgren is really playing at a high level. If you can keep him healthy, I think that he's going to be such a unique player that he's going to be a nightmare matchup for opposing teams. I think they can plow through this because, again, they've got now 2 players who can go out and win games on their own. So I'd say, yeah, they could be a contender. And again, maybe not make it to the finals, but maybe make the conference finals. If they're able to stay in that 2 seed, maybe they're playing a lesser team in the first round and they can advance and then move on from there and maybe pull off an upset. It would be an upset if they would have beat the Lakers or Phoenix in the second round, even if they were the higher seeded team.
Sure.
But SGA is that good.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously he'll probably end up starting in the All-Star game, like you said, first team All-NBA last year. So he's a legit star player, no denying that. And this is a team that traditionally has drafted well, and it's showing up on the court. Jalen Williams playing really, really great basketball for them after a good rookie year last year. Josh Giddey has some problems ahead of him, but he's been having a nice season. They may be without him for the rest of the way. I'm not sure. Isaiah Joe has been a huge find for them, Sap. Not that his stats are eye-popping. He's averaging 10 points a game, but he's shooting the absolute lights out of the basketball. I'm going to pull up his stats right here, Sap. He's been shooting from 3-point land this year. And this is a guy who spent 2 years on the Sixers before heading to the Thunder last year. He's shooting 46% from 3, Sap, which is just so deadly for somebody coming off the bench. To be able to shoot nearly 50% from 3-point land is such a luxury to have. And so the Thunder have a lot of nice pieces that can do a lot of different things. And they certainly look legit right now. I don't think that they're going to finish second place in the West. I could see them avoiding that play-in for sure. But I think they're probably around 5 or 6 realistically. Right now they are in a tie, 2 games behind with the Nuggets. The Lakers are on that doorstep 3.5, and the Kings are 4 back. The Mavericks are 4 back. The Suns are 4 back. So there's a lot. It's obviously it's early still, even though we're saying, oh, it's a quarter of the way through the year. It's still early, so these teams are going to be naturally bunched up. But I think once Denver gets Jamal Murray back, as the Lakers continue to progress throughout the season, I could see them overtaking them. But that leads us, I guess, Sap, to the team that in the West that you had as your kind of long shot special team and guys that you loved on that team, the Timberwolves, who have the best record in the West. They're 15-4. On top of that, Oklahoma City Thunder team and Nuggets team and Lakers team. So, Sap, are they contenders or pretenders?
Absolutely, without question. The reason I say this is their best player hasn't even exploded this year. And he's missed a couple of games recently with that hip injury. And of course, I'm talking about Anthony Edwards. I think he's going to only play better when he comes back from that injury. He hasn't forced it, which again shows me why he's a great player. He didn't read his press clippings and say, "Oh, I'm going to be the next guy in the NBA, so let me go out there and show everybody I'm the next guy." He lets the game come to him. He's an outstanding passer. He rebounds, he defends, and he can score from anywhere on the court. He's that good. He's the alpha on that team. But the reason they're really a contender is Karl Anthony Towns. He's playing the way we expected Karl Anthony Towns to play throughout his career. We remember, 5-6 years ago when they had the general managers polls, he would always finish number one of pick a player you'd like to build your franchise around. Now, people might laugh at that because we've seen Nikola Jokic win 2 MVPs in a championship. We've seen Giannis win 2 MVPs in a championship. We know how good Embiid is as an MVP, and Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum. But 5-6 years ago, he was the guy because he was so versatile. We're talking about nearly a 7-footer who can shoot from the perimeter, can defend, can rebound, do everything. His game was so natural. He had a couple of off years. Part of it was because of some personal problems. He lost his mom and some other really close members of the family to COVID. He had COVID.
Members, yeah.
A lot to go through there. And it seems now he's finally fully focused and again, cut him some slack considering what he went through for 3 years. He now is playing the way we expected. Rudy Gobert gives them another great defender. And this team plays defense. That travels. That's why I think they're certainly a contender.
Yeah, I didn't think the Gobert Towns thing was going to work because last year it just seemed very awkward, but they've made it fit better. I think Towns, like you said, is more comfortable, and they feel more comfortable saying, okay, well, you don't have to necessarily play both in the post.
Mm-hmm.
You can both play, Rudy, you can stay in the post. Towns, you can kind of shoot from, we trust you from the perimeter or mid range, and that's worked well. And what happened, I think, with Anthony Edwards last year is he became the best player on that team, and they still didn't necessarily know how to clear out the lane for him. And now they're doing a much better job at that. And so I think that's really obviously advantageous for them. Something interesting that Anthony Edwards has said the other day in an interview, which kind of speaks to what you're saying, Sap, was he was talking about his all-star nod last year and that he doesn't even consider that he was an all-star because he was an alternate. He was named after an injury. So he really has that chip on his shoulder, even though he's the number 1 pick of the draft, but that drive to be a great player.
He's so unique, Jet. Comments like that make me like him even more. And right now, he's my second favorite player in the league behind LeBron. When LeBron retires, this is going to be my guy. So I've selected him. I hope he's not turned off by that because I've been a jinx over the years, with Joe Burrow now being my second favorite quarterback, and he goes ahead and gets this wrist injury that knocks him out for the season. Oh, but a total jinx. It's like, if they hear this, like Eddie Mush from A Bronx Tale, oh, John Sapichetti up in New England picked me as his second favorite player, the heir apparent to his favorite player. Boy, that's great, isn't it? Because I'm going to start sustaining injuries. But I think Anthony Edwards will get right through that. And just when he talked earlier in the season about load management and missing games, and he talked about how many young players, fans of his that wear his jersey or his sneakers, want to come see him play when he's on the road. And Jason Tatum echoed that. So that's why I like both of those guys. Need more of that from the young players. I think the league is in good hands when the likes of Anthony Edwards and Jason Tatum and Luka Doncic are going to be the faces of this league. Once LeBron, Steph Curry, and Kevin Durant move on, although all three are playing at still an incredibly high level, there was no rush to go anywhere. But this guy is going to be one of the few faces of the league. Absolutely love him. And I root for this team because of him and because of Karl Anthony Towns, who is very likable figure, and Rudy Gobert, maybe not the most likable figure, but you got Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns. That's good enough for me.
So, Sap, you are on board with the Timberwolves could be the champions of the league by this time in June.
I don't think that, but I would call them contenders because I think they'll get through at least the first, maybe the second round. They could be standing there waiting for the Lakers or the Nuggets or the Suns, because I think those are still the three teams you have to look at in the Western Conference, right?
Well,
Good as
Sap,
OKC is in Sacramento is, those three other teams have like proven champions. So that's why I would put the Lakers, Suns, and Nuggets as the three favorites in the Western Conference. But look, if Minnesota continues to play the way they have and they play defense, that's the big thing with them, they could certainly be difficult to beat. Let's not forget, Golden State, when they got to the finals in 2015, they hadn't really sniffed the finals before that. They kind of crashed the party. There wasn't like this long process of, okay, we lost in the first round, lost in the second round, then lost in the conference finals, then finally made the conference. They just kind of broke through. And maybe Minnesota does the same thing.
Well, so Sap, I guess, so the question that I have then to follow it up is, what is the Minnesota right now as it stands has the best record in the league, the best winning percentage, 15-4, 789 winning percentage, right above the Celtics at 15-5. What constitutes success? What constitutes failure for the Timberwolves when the season's all said and done? What is that sort of line they need to hit?
They've got to get to the conference finals. I mean, if they go ahead and win 58, 60 games and end up as number one seed, you have to get to the conference finals. Now, that could mean they have to beat Phoenix or the Lakers in round two. And even though they would have home court advantage, beating Phoenix and the Lakers, if Phoenix and the Lakers are healthy, that's not going to be easy to do. But when you have the best record in your conference, you have to get to the conference finals, or now you become the Atlanta Hawks of 10 years ago, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's fair. I think that, this Timberwolves team as currently constituted has never made the conference finals. As a franchise, they've made the conference finals once with
20
Kevin
years
Garnett
ago with Kevin Garnett. Yep.
and Latrell Sprewell. And they had one other good player on that team.
Sam Cassell on
Sam
that
Cassell.
team?
Yes, Sam Cassell. That was the third guy. And thank you, Sap. And so the barometer is not very high, but still, like you said, if you win your conference, if you come in first place, you should at least get to the conference finals. I think that's a fair spot for them, Sap. And so let's see. We have some more contenders or pretenders teams, Sap. Let's go to the Philadelphia 76ers in the Eastern Conference. You mentioned them, Joel Embiid, a couple of minutes ago. Right now, they're sitting at 12-7. Not bad. 2.5 games out of first place. I think they had a nice start to the season, have cooled down a little bit as of late. They've had some injuries. Embiid's rested a little bit, as he's want to do. And right now, Sap, as it stands, they've lost to the Celtics 2 times. That's a team that they've really struggled to beat. But they have also beaten them one time this season. They just beat the Thunder. They beat the Lakers. They have these games where you're like, yeah, this team looks like they could be contenders, and then they'll lose a game that they really should win. And so it's kind of hard to make sense, heads or tails, of this team.
Without question, I think they're a pretender. And again, I love Tyrese Maxey. He's stepped up. He's becoming a star in the league. I think he'll make the All-Star game. And B, to me, I just get concerned with that after winning the MVP, he feels like his career's been fulfilled. I don't see him being the same player he was last year. And they're going to need him to be as good as last year, if not even better, which is asking a lot for the reigning MVP of the league. And I don't know if he'll be able to step up. And then the rest of that roster is okay. I mean, they've got a lot of veteran players who are nice players, but maybe they're asking them to do a bit too much. Tobias Harris, is he going to be a consistent player night in and night out? I don't think so. So I would call them pretenders in the Eastern Conference. I think certainly the Celtics and Milwaukee are better. I wouldn't necessarily say Orlando's better, although if they hooked up in a series, I think Orlando could beat them because they've got some size up front that could bother Joel Embiid. And then I'm still stuck on the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're starting to play a little bit better, and I think they would match up pretty well against Philadelphia. So I'll call the 76ers, as of right now, pretenders.
All right. And a team that just knocked out my Celtics from the in-season tournament, the Indiana Pacers. They are the 6th seed right now. If the season ended today, 11-8, 3.5 games out of first place. And they have a legitimate star. Similar to what we were talking about with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder, it looks like Tyrese Halliburton is going to be one of those players that's going to be, one of the faces of the league going forward. Even though he plays in Indiana, but he's starting to play really spectacular basketball.
He really is. I know he's one of your favorite players. He was a 20-10 guy last year, which you just don't see many of those in the league anymore. I mean, I remember Isaiah Thomas would do it. I'm talking about Isaiah Thomas of the Pistons, or even Kevin Johnson, who's playing with Phoenix. A 20-10 guy is a rarity in the league. He's a fascinating and fabulous
Sapp,
player.
actually, this season he's a 27-12 guy.
Incredible. He's got to be in some consideration for MVP. The only thing that would hinder him is the team's 11-8. They're on pace to win 46, 47 games. Although we've seen MVPs come from the 6 seed before, right? Russell Westbrook won his MVP as a 6 seed, as did Nikola Jokic a few years after that. I don't know if I would put Halliburton quite in the MVP race, but he's that good. This is a team that plays at a fast pace, and give Rick Carlisle a lot of credit. Rick Carlisle, when he was in Dallas, played at a different pace. Now, again, he's been coaching for a long period of time. Give him a lot of credit. He sees how the game is and knows what his talent is and builds the team around that accordingly. I still think they're pretenders. They're probably another player short. I think they're the biggest surprise in the league, Jet. I thought they were going to be in contention to be the worst team in the league, and here they are, 11-8, making to the semifinals of the in-season tournament and play the Milwaukee Bucks tomorrow night in Vegas. I was shocked they beat the Celtics. Because the Celtics beat them by 50-plus points several weeks ago. I didn't think the Celtics were going to do that again because Halliburton missed that game in Boston, but I thought the Celtics would be able to beat Indiana comfortably, and it turned out Halliburton had none of it, and he's a fabulous player. I know one of your favorite players. Just look at the guards that come out of Kentucky. Isn't it insane? Like, you're talking good. What? De'Aaron Fox, Devin Booker, SGA, Halliburton. I mean, it's just like every year there's a guard coming out of Kentucky, not to mention John Wall, 13 years ago had a fabulous career. But this, again, is a team I think that's overachieved incredibly, but I would still call them pretenders.
I would agree with you. Also, not to be, step on your toes there, Sap, but he did not go to Kentucky, believe it or not.
He didn't?
No,
Where did he go?
Iowa State, which is not Kentucky.
Well, that's a good point. I should
look
know
at those
my
players coming out
of
look at those players coming out of Iowa State, though, Sap. You got him, and you got the kid. There's a kid from Boston who went to Iowa State, but that's okay,
that's
Sap.
Right.
I'm sure he was recruited by Kentucky.
Oh yeah,
Listen to your point, Sap. You can't keep track. Can't keep track of all these Kentucky players. That's okay.
I'm an old guy, and I was hoping he went to Kentucky for my paisan John Calipari. I had always thought he'd gone there, but yeah, that was that's even more surprising that he didn't go to Kentucky.
It's probably why he ended up dropping in the draft, Sap, instead of going where he should have been. If he'd gone to Kentucky instead of Iowa State, he would have gone a lot higher. But I will say this, and in terms of talking about that Celtics Pacers game and this Pacers team as a whole, like the Celtics did not play poorly in that Pacers game. The Pacers just seemed to want it more, and Halliburton was going shot for shot with Jason Tatum at the end of the game. And I think that the Pacers, they have a tough nose mentality, which is kind of what those smaller market teams need to have to survive. A good coach, like you said, Rick Carlisle. And I think they made two shrewd offseason additions. Obi Toppin, they got it from the Knicks. He's having a nice year for himself. He really was never utilized on the Knicks. And Bruce Brown obviously played a huge role in the Nuggets winning their championship last year. And he's played really well and given, I think, some nice veteran leadership for that team. So they got a bunch of good players. Benedict Mathurin was a high pick last year, had a really good rookie year. Then they got veterans like Miles Turner and Buddy Hield. You know what they bring to the equation. I think it's a team that makes the playoffs, probably loses in the first round. But the fact that they are on the inside looking out in terms of the play-in thing right now, I think that's very impressive. And Halliburton deserves a lot of credit. Carlisle deserves a lot of credit. And the way they play is it's a fun style of basketball. And it's also, you can tell that they are really into it and trying to win. So they're obviously I think the long shot for this in-season tournament of the four teams left. It's the Bucks against the Pacers, as you mentioned. The East and the West, the two teams remaining are the Lakers, who've yet to lose an in-season tournament game, and the Pelicans. So the Pacers are they far and away the least likely of those teams to get there. Not saying that New Orleans is any great shakes, but at least they have guys that people are familiar with: Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram. that sort of stuff.
Isn't the interesting thing about Indiana is I think they're a team that can sneak up on people during the regular season because they have a distinct style. And if you're not ready for it, they can just run you out the gym like they did the Celtics in the second half. But once you get to the playoffs and you have a 7-game series in round one, which can last nearly 3 weeks, a veteran team will be better prepared and ready to play that type of style. So I could see them getting in the playoffs, being a team that is fun to watch, but may have difficulty matching up against that veteran team that's prepared for them. But look, give Rick Carlisle and that entire team led by Tyrese Halliburton a ton of credit because I think they've overachieved more than any team in the league because I thought they were going to be in contention for, a high lottery pick.
I mean, listen, maybe they are not doing themselves any favors by not getting that sap, but I think for the Pacers fans, and I think this is the good part about the in-season tournament, like there's no way in hell the Pacers are winning the championship this year. There's probably very, very unlikely they even get it to, past the first round or second round of the playoffs. But they could. I mean, all they have to do is win two straight games now, and they win the in-season tournament.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that's exciting for fans, and it gives, I think it gives fans of teams that don't have necessarily championship aspirations. Well, you could still win this. Like that's something you've accomplished something in the season. And so I think that in terms of these final 4 teams left, like that's giving their fan base, could give their fan base a real boost in Indiana if they were able to do that. Like this isn't going to mean that much to the Lakers or the Bucks. They have far higher aspirations this season than winning the in-season tournament. Like it'll be good for them if they do, but for the Pacers, it seems like it's the biggest deal for them.
Oh, without question. They've got a great fan base. And you do know if the Lakers win the in-season tournament and LeBron kind of celebrates it, he's going to be mocked.
Yep.
Because he gets mocked for everything he does. Exactly. By you, Skip Bayless, and everyone else that hates the guy and will say, well, is he Michael Jordan now? Because Jordan never won the in-season tournament. They're going to say that with a lot of snide remarks to go with it. But yeah, I mean, I think the league would like to see Lakers Bucks in the finals. They would have preferred Lakers Celtics, but Celtics weren't able to beat Indiana. But Indiana's a fascinating story. They're building a good culture there. They've got a hell of a coach, and you've got a superstar who, again, is another player that's so likable because he plays all the time. You have to drag him off the court. A very likable player, Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about Halliburton is, he had a great game against the Celtics, as he's having virtually a great game against every team. And the Celtics' strength defensively is their 2 all NBA defensive caliber guards, and Derek White and Drew Holiday, and he had no problem against those guys.
Right.
So, he was hitting tough shots, but, great offense is going to beat great defense, and he's shown that he's capable of putting up great offense and distributing the basketball. 12 assists a game is really impressive. Okay, Sap, let's do our last 2 contenders or pretenders that we talked about. Let's do the New York Knicks, 12-8, 3 games out of first place. They are, to me, Sap, seem just very, very almost identical to the Knicks team last year.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're well coached. They play hard. It's a physical style. They almost feel like the Pittsburgh Steelers of basketball. Like the Steelers aren't the most talented team. They've got a really good defense, but if you face them, you're going to have a long night. You may beat them, but it's not going to be easy. You kind of get the same feeling with the New York Knicks. They're just going to drag you into their style of play. You do beat them, and then you kind of feel it for a few days because they are a physical, tough, well-coached team. So I would still consider them a pretender. I mean, they were able to win a series last year against Cleveland, and they went 6 games with Miami. So, if you're a Knicks fan, although you're starved for a championship, you haven't won one in 50 years. That was a pretty good postseason for the Knicks, beating Cleveland, who I thought was a better team and still think was a better team than the Knicks, and then taking Miami to 6 games. But again, they just still lack that go-to player. I mean, Jalen Brunson's wonderful. He really is. He's a fabulous player. Julius Randle as well. But those guys should be second and third guys on your team, not 1 and 2. So they're like a player short. But we do know they're going to play hard. They're going to play tough. But I would still consider them pretenders.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that again they could win a series. They're an interesting team in the regular season, and I think this is a hallmark of a Tom Thibodeau team. They could beat any team on any given night, even if the other team plays well. They have a high single game ceiling because they do have a bunch of good players. And they have guys who can score. Brunson, Randall, Barrett, quickly. All those guys can give you 30 in a game if you desperately need it. And then they have some nice defensive pieces like Josh Hart, who's one of my favorite players in the league, because I love those defensive guys. Mitchell Robinson, we know what he can do on the defensive end in terms of being a shot blocker. They have good players. But I think in a 7-game series against a team that has superior talent, it's going to be really hard for them to beat. Though, again, I think you and I both agreed Cleveland. I think I picked Cleveland in a sweep last year, and they made me look foolish. So, Knicks, I think, again, they remind me so much of their team from last year. I don't see any improvement, and I also don't see anything that they are doing worse. So I guess by virtue of that, I'd say they'll lose in the second round, which, based on this roster, again, that's not a bad finish for them.
No, and again, in that market, expectations are so high, even though the organization hasn't done much for 50 years. They are starving for a championship. Can they go out maybe in the offseason, get a free agent? And I'm talking about a major free agent, or make a splash deal at the trade deadline and maybe elevate themselves into the second tier in the Eastern Conference. Because I still think the Celtics and Milwaukee are the two best teams in the Eastern Conference. They're going to have to sustain an injury or really underachieve for some of these other teams to get to the conference finals, or at least get to the finals, more so. But yeah, no, this is a well-coached team with Thibodeau. But again, it's a grinding style that takes a lot out of their opponents. It also takes a lot out of them because of the style they play.
It does. And obviously they were a team that was hoping for Karl Anthony Towns, and he's at this point he's not going anywhere, considering how well the Timberwolves have been playing, as we talked about. Last team, Sap, the Dallas Mavericks. They're 11-8, 4 games out of first place, in 6th place currently in the Western Conference. Started out the year like a ball of fire, and they've cooled down as of late. I'm not even going to dissect them that much and just say they're a pretender, because Kyrie Irving is the ultimate cooler. So, any team with Kyrie is not going anywhere as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, and I also wonder if the ownership situation there is going to lend instability to the organization. We know Mark Cuban sold most of the team to the Adelson Group, which owns casinos. He's still going to be involved running things day to day. That's kind of an awkward situation. So, is that going to lend instability to the organization? That's a question that we're going to have. Look, Luka Doncic is phenomenal. Kyrie Irving doesn't play the vast majority of games. He's going to have his periods in the course of a season where he's just not with it, whether it be physically or mentally. And then you go from there. And Grant Williams started out really hot. He's kind of leveled off, but he's a nice player. But I don't see them as a true contender, because again, in the West, I would put Minnesota, Denver, Phoenix, the Lakers, even Golden State, if they get all healthy and get their act together. I would put all those teams above the Dallas Mavericks, not to mention OKC, which again is off to a really good start. So you could be looking at Dallas as the 7 or 8 seed. Are they going to beat Denver in the first round or the Lakers in the first round? I don't think so.
Like I said, it all comes down to Kyrie Irving is the ultimate cooler. So, whatever, as long as he's on that team, they're not winning anything. Sap, we got about 5 minutes left, and we just, kind of wrapped up those contender pretender things. So let me ask you this, Sap. We said the final 4 teams in the in-season tournament, the Lakers and the Pelicans, are going to square off in Vegas, and the Bucks and the Pacers are going to square off in Vegas. Winner of the East plays the winner of the West. So, Sap, who's going to win the whole thing?
I think the Lakers are going to win the whole thing. I mean, they've been focused on this thing from the start. They haven't lost yet in the in-season tournament. LeBron's playing at a very high level, as is Anthony Davis. You got Austin Reeves now coming off the bench. He was pretty spectacular in the quarterfinal game against Phoenix, which was probably the best game of the in-season tournament. You had all that star power.
Marred by a bad call, though.
True. But, it's fixed for LeBron to win this.
I think so.
Sure you and Skip Bayless would say.
Yep.
Yeah, You haters, you. The amazing thing about LeBron, and let me just go off and support my guy here, because this is
all right.
What I do,
you only got 4 minutes, Sap. So
okay,
you better.
I'm quick.
Make it really flowery.
All right. So the guy he's without question the greatest 19-year-old in the history of the league. Right. As a rookie, he averaged, I think, 21, 6, and 6, and double the wins of the Cleveland Cavaliers, who when he went there was the worst team in basketball, and he got them close to being a playoff contender. So I think we can all agree he's the greatest 19-year-old.
I think that's more than
ever.
fair. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I know Victor Wembanyama, I would say Wembanyama's been a disappointment this year, but he is not as good as LeBron was at 19. Okay, so LeBron's the greatest 19-year-old in the history of the league. He's also the greatest soon-to-be 39-year-old. I mean, he's still playing at an incredible level. I mean, 31, 8, and 11 in the quarterfinal win over Phoenix. He played 40 minutes. He's truly engaged. So I think they're going to win it. I think they'll find a way to beat New Orleans. I also think Indiana's going to pull off an upset and beat Milwaukee. I really do, because they're just on such a roll and playing with a lot of confidence. And again, that style of play, they could reach 140 against Milwaukee, because Milwaukee does not play defense at this point, especially on the perimeter. I mean, they lost a lot in losing Drew Holiday. So I think it's Indiana beating
118
Milwaukee.
points a game is the
They
Bucks
do.
right.
Right. And again, their best defenders are interior defenders, Giannis and Lopez. And Lopez has lost a step. And Giannis, as good a defender as he is more of a help defender who will come from the weak side, make the big block. Maybe one-on-one, he's not as elite as people think. But their perimeter defense is horrible. I mean, losing Drew Holiday was major.
Pacers also averaged the most points per game in the league. Seth,
yeah,
whatever
I think they could. Exactly, they could reach 140 in this game, blow out Milwaukee. So I think Indiana, Lakers winning it.
Okay. And will the Lakers hang a banner up in the Staples Center, Sep?
Hell no. No, the Celtics and Lakers cannot hang a banner for this. I just don't see it.
I was talking with some friends about this. Would the Pacers or Pelicans?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The league, I think, would want a team to hang a banner, right? Because if they're trying to build this thing up, but there's no way the Celtics or Lakers would. I mean, obviously the Celtics are out of it, but it would be embarrassing.
Well, you know who might hang it up is the Indianapolis Colts, who,
the Colts
banner,
would. The Colts would do it for the Pacers, sure, yeah.
Sure, there you go, Indiana.
Conference finalists. Colts have that conference finalist banner. Absolutely. That's a great one. After they won a Super Bowl too. What's that
right?
About?
They won a Super Bowl in 2006, and 8 years later they're hanging up conference finalists because they lost to the Patriots, during Deflategate. Yeah, I don't think the Lakers. Geez, I hope the Lakers, if the Celtics, would hang a banner for this. It would be like the Yankees hanging up, American League East champions. You don't do that when you've won as much as those organizations.
Yeah. I mean, I hope the Lakers don't win it just because I don't want them to. I think it would be a cool story if the Pacers do. But they're the only undefeated team, I think, through this all, and they seem to be taking the game seriously. The matchup broke nicely for them that they get to play the Pelicans. Though they had the toughest first round matchup, arguably, in playing the Suns. So I'd agree with you, Zep. I could see it. I think the Lakers will pull it out, and LeBron will add an in-season tournament win to his resume, and he won't win a championship this year, so he'll just have that.
Well, no, he's going to win 2 more championships, so he and Jordan will have 6 each, but LeBron will have an in-season tournament.
That will be the tiebreaker, for sure.
Yep, absolutely. He's already beaten them anyway. He's the greater player. Yeah, he's the greater player already. He doesn't need any more championships.
Well, that's going to do it for us here. I know, Sap, you're going to be locked into all these the in-season tournament stuff for the Lakers. So we'll talk about it's going to happen this weekend. So next week when we're back, we will have our first ever in-season tournament champion crowned. We'll talk about the game and how they got there. And we'll also talk about whatever else and other NBA news crops up as we pass the quarter of the season mark. And so make sure you listen to us next week. Thanks for listening this week. Make sure you check out our social medias at JohnSapp25, at Jet Stryer. Thanks to Full Press Coverage. Check out their website, and you can find the podcast wherever podcasts are found. Pick and Roll NBA Podcast with Jet and Sapp. Talk to you later, everybody. See ya.